The worst part was not losing the solo. The worst part was standing in the wings in my good navy blouse, holding a thin folder somebody had written the word chorus on in blue pen, and watching my cousin Dana walk up onto the riser that had my name taped under it. I could see the tape from where I stood. Someone had peeled half of it away, so my name showed as a torn white scrap, and Dana's small heels covered the rest. My mother was in the third row, in her pearl earrings, and when Dana reached the front, my mother turned to the woman beside her and beamed like a lighthouse. I stood very still. My throat, which had carried that entire song 100 times in my kitchen, closed up like a fist. And nobody in that whole warm hall knew that the voice they were about to hear was not the voice that had won. Let me go back, because a wound like this has a long root, and I want you to see the root before you see the blade. My name is Ruth. I am 31, and I have been singing since before I could spell my own name. Not the pretty, easy kind of singing that families brag about at dinner. The other kind. The kind you claw out of yourself alone. I grew up in a house where my older brother was the clever one, and my mother was tired. And I was the child who could be told to wait. So I waited a lot. And while I waited, I hummed. Humming turned into singing, and singing turned into the one thing on earth that was completely mine. Because it lived inside my own chest, where nobody could reach in and take it. Or so I believed, for a very long time. Right up until the spring, my mother reached in and took it anyway. I should tell you how the singing actually started, because it matters to the rest. When I was 7, my grandmother, my father's mother, used to keep me on. Sundays, while my parents drove my brother to his chess tournaments an hour away. Her apartment smelled of orange peel and old hymn books, and she had a piano. She could no longer really play because her knuckles had gone stiff. But she would sit me on the bench beside her and pick out a single line with one finger, slow and patient, and she would say, "Now you carry it, Ruthie. I can't reach the high part anymore." And I would carry it. That is the first time I remember a sound coming out of me that felt bigger than my body. A note going up where her fingers could not follow. She would close her eyes when I hit it. Nobody in my house closed their eyes for me. That, I think, is the whole reason I never stopped. The community choir was called the Meridian Singers, and it met on Tuesday nights. In a stone church hall that smelled of candle wax and radiator dust. I joined when I was 24, after my divorce, when my apartment was too quiet and my hands did not know what to do in the evenings. The conductor was a small, exact man named Mr. Okafor, who had conducted professional choirs in 2 countries before he retired to our little town and refused to fully retire. He wore the same gray cardigan every week, and he heard everything. If one alto in the back row went flat, his left eyebrow would rise. A millimeter, and 40 grown adults would correct themselves without a word. I loved him, the way you love a strict teacher who never once flatters you, but always tells you the truth. He had a saying he repeated so often, we mouthed it along with him. The music does not care who your family is. The solo I wanted was in a piece called The Long Way Home. It was the anchor of the whole spring concert. A slow, aching thing that opened with a single, unaccompanied voice in the dark. Before the rest of the choir came in, like a sunrise. Whoever sang that opening carried the entire evening on her shoulders for 90 seconds of total silence. No piano, no safety net. Just one person and the truth of her own pitch. I had wanted it for 3 years. Not politely wanted the way you want water. I used to practice the opening phrase in my car, in the grocery store, parking lot with the windows up, feeling like a fool. Doing it anyway. Watching my own breath fog the glass in winter, while I found the note again and again until it stopped shaking. Why that solo and not another? Because of the words, honestly. The opening line is about walking a long road back to a place that may not want you anymore, and singing it anyway, into the dark. Because the singing is the only way home you have. I was 28 the first time I heard someone else perform it, an older woman in the choir the year before. And I sat in the audience and cried in a way that embarrassed me because it was my whole life in 90 seconds. The long way. The road back to people who could tell you to wait. The singing into the dark because it was the only thing that was yours. I decided that night in a folding chair that one day that opening would be mine and I would earn it honestly, note by note. The only clean thing in a family that kept score. Mr. Okafor did not hand out solos by favor, and that was the thing I trusted most about him. He held auditions, real ones, and he had a rule that was almost old-fashioned. Every audition was recorded. He kept a little silver cassette recorder on the music stand, an ancient thing. He refused to replace, and he pressed the red button before each singer began. He said a recording could not be charmed, could not be someone's niece, could not owe anyone a favor. The tape is fair, he told us once, in his flat, careful voice. People are not always fair. The tape is. I remember laughing at that, gently, the way you laugh at an old man's habit. I did not know I would one day owe my whole dignity to that ugly little machine. I auditioned on a Tuesday in late February. It had snowed that afternoon, wet, heavy snow, and the church hall was half empty because the roads were bad. Maybe 11 of us showed up. Mr. Okafor said we would do auditions anyway since we had a quorum, and he set the recorder on the stand and clicked it on. When my turn came, my hands were shaking so hard I pressed them flat against my thighs. He nodded once. The hall went silent. And I sang the opening of The Long Way Home into that cold, waxy quiet. And for the first time in my life, the note came out exactly the way it lived in my head, round and steady and unafraid. When I finished, Mr. Okafor did not smile, because he never smiled, but he was quiet for a long moment, and then he said, again, the last phrase. I sang it again. He clicked the recorder off. 2 weeks later, he posted the list on the corkboard by the door, and next to the words opening solo, in his small square handwriting, was my name. Ruth. Just Ruth. I stood in front of that corkboard until my ears rang. I want you to know how I told people, because it shows you the small hope I still carried. I called my grandmother first, the one with the stiff knuckles, and she was 90 by then and slow on the phone. But when I said the word solo, she went quiet, and then she said, "You carried it all the way up then?" I knew you would. That was enough for me. That should have been enough for anyone. But some stubborn child part of me also wanted my mother to close her. Eyes for me, the way my grandmother did, just once. So I called her too. And that is where the trouble truly began, though I did not feel it as trouble yet. I felt it as the same old cold I had felt my whole life. And I mistook the cold for something ordinary, something survivable. The way you mistake the first ache of a real illness for tiredness. My mother found out the full weight of it sideways, from the same phone. Call, and slightly annoyed to have not been consulted first. "I hear you're doing some little song at your church group," she said, though I had just told her it was the solo. I told her again, more firmly, that it was not little. It was the opening of the whole concert, 90 seconds alone in front of 200 people. There was a pause on the line. The particular pause my mother makes when she is deciding how much of your happiness to allow. "Well," she said finally, "that's nice for you." And then she changed the subject to my brother's promotion.
At the bank, how proud she was, how far he had come.
I told myself it did not matter. I told myself I had stopped needing her to be proud of me years ago. I was lying, of course. You never fully stop. You just get better at pretending the not stopping is peace. Now, my cousin Dana, I need you to understand Dana, because it would be easy to make her a villain, and she was not, exactly. Dana was 26, my aunt's daughter, and she was the kind of pretty that makes rooms rearrange themselves. She had a nice voice, a genuinely nice voice, light and sweet, the sort that sounds lovely at a wedding after 2 glasses of wine. But she had never worked at it a day in her life, because she had never had to. Things came to Dana. Doors opened, chairs appeared, people forgave her. And Dana had recently moved back to town after a job fell through in the city, and she was living with my aunt, and she was, in my mother's words, going through a hard time and needs something to feel good about. I did not know yet that I was going to be the something. I did not know that in my family, when someone needs to feel good, they are often given a piece of me. It happened over a single weekend in March, and I was not in the room for any of it. My mother, it turned out, had run into Mr. Okafor's wife at the pharmacy. From there, I can only reconstruct it. But I have reconstructed it many times, standing in that fluorescent aisle in my imagination. My mother mentioned, warmly, how wonderful it was that the choir welcomed young people. How her niece Dana had such a gift and was so fragile right now. And would it not be a beautiful thing for the family if Dana could have a moment in the spring concert? And somewhere in that pharmacy conversation, between the cough drops and the vitamins, my solo started quietly changing hands. Not through the conductor, around him. Through wives and committees and the soft, relentless machinery my mother had spent her whole life learning to operate. The first I heard of it was a phone call from my mother on a Sunday evening. Her voice was bright, the dangerous kind of bright. "I've arranged something lovely," she said. "Dana is going to sing the opening at your concert. Won't that be special for her? And you'll still be up there singing with everyone. So it's not as if you're left out." I remember I was standing at my kitchen counter, cutting an apple, and I set the knife down very carefully because my hand had gone strange. "Mom," I said, "that's my solo. I auditioned for it. Mr. Okafor gave it to me. It's on the list in his own handwriting," she said, in the voice she uses to end conversations. "Ruth, don't make this about you. Dana needs this more than you do. You've had your fun. Don't make this about you. The solo that had my name on it? Don't make this about you." I want to tell you I fought back that night. I did not. I have thought a great deal about why. And the honest answer is that 30 years of being the child who could be told to wait does something to a person. It builds a reflex. When my mother pushed, my whole body folded on a hinge it had been folding on my whole life. I said something weak, something like, "I don't think it works that way." And she talked over me, listing all the reasons Dana deserved a kindness. And I got off the phone and stood in my kitchen with a cut apple going brown on the board, and I felt about 9 years old. I told myself I would talk to Mr. Okafor. I told myself he would fix it, that the whole thing was some misunderstanding my mother had invented out of air. I did not yet understand how much air my mother could turn into fact, or how tired I was of being the only one who ever seemed to notice. The next Tuesday, I got to the church hall early, on purpose, to talk to him. But Dana was already there. She was sitting on the front riser in a cream sweater, swinging her feet. And my mother was there too, which she had never once been in 3 years, sitting in a folding chair against the wall like a queen inspecting a small country. And Mr. Okafor was at the piano, and when I came in, he gave me a look I could not read, a careful, closed look, and something in me went cold. He said, "Ruth, good, we can begin," and he did not meet my eyes. And I understood that whatever conversation I had come to have was not going to be a conversation I would win in front of my mother. She had gotten there first. She always got there first. That was her whole gift, arriving before the truth did and rearranging the furniture so the truth had nowhere to sit. We ran the piece. Dana stood where I should have stood. And here is the small, sharp thing I noticed first. The first clue, though I did not know to call it that. Dana did not know the music. Not really. She sang the notes, the sweet, light notes. But she came in half a beat late on the opening because she was waiting for a cue that does not exist. Since the whole point of that solo is that there is no cue, you begin out of pure silence and pure nerve. She kept glancing at Mr. Okafor for a downbeat he would never give her. And every time she glanced, I saw his jaw tighten, just slightly, the way it did when an alto went flat. He knew. Whatever my mother had arranged in a pharmacy aisle, the man conducting knew that the wrong person was standing on the riser. But he said nothing. He just corrected Dana gently, over and over, and I sang my part from the second row like a good girl, and my mother watched from her folding chair, satisfied. For the next 6 weeks, I did something I am both ashamed of and, strangely, not ashamed of. I helped. I could not stop myself. When Dana could not find the starting pitch, I hummed it to her under my breath before rehearsals, so quietly, only she could hear. When she came in late, I taught her a trick I used, counting a slow breath in my own chest instead of waiting for a cue. I did it partly because I could not bear to hear the piece I loved sung badly, and partly, I think, because helping was the only power I had left. If I could not stand on the riser, I could at least be the reason the song did not fall apart. Dana was grateful in her light, careless way. "You're so good at this," she told me once, without a trace of understanding. "You should have tried out." I looked at her for a long moment. "I did," I said. She had already turned away to check her reflection in the dark church window. There were small moments in those weeks that I held on to. A woman named Priya, an alto, who had been in the choir as long as I had, found me in the church kitchen one evening, washing out the coffee urn, and she stood next to me and dried the cups without being asked. "That solo was yours," she said quietly, not looking at me. "We all know it was yours." I did not trust my voice, so I just nodded and kept scrubbing at a stain that was not there. "Mr. Okafor doesn't like it either," she added. "You can tell. He hasn't looked at your cousin properly once." I asked her why he did. Not just fix it then, if he did not like it. Priya wrung out a cloth. "Because your mother went over his head," she said. "She talked to the concert committee, told them it was a family arrangement. that you were happy to step aside. He's a proud man. He won't fight a family in public. He thinks it's beneath the music. That word, beneath, stayed with me for weeks, turning over in the dark. But it was Priya's next sentence that turned out to matter, though neither of us knew it. She said, almost as an afterthought, drying a cup she had already dried, "You know, he keeps all of it. Every audition, going back years. He's got a whole box of those little tapes at home, labeled and dated. He played me my first audition once, from 6 years ago, so I could hear how much I'd grown. He believes in it, the record of things. Says memory lies, but tape doesn't." I filed that away without meaning to. A box of tapes, labeled and dated. Memory lies, but tape doesn't. At the time, it just sounded like a sweet old habit, an old man's harmless faith in an obsolete machine. I did not hear it as what it was, which was a door, sitting quietly in the dark, waiting for the right hand to open it. I want to be honest with you. I did not open it. I never went looking for that tape. What happened on its own. The betrayal got bigger in April, and it got bigger in a way that told me it was never really about Dana at all. I stopped by my aunt's house to drop off a casserole dish I had borrowed, and my aunt, who is kinder than my mother and much worse at keeping secrets, hugged me at the door and said the thing that broke the floor open. "It's so good of you," she said, patting my cheek, "to give up your little song for Dana. Your mother told us all how you insisted. She said you stood right up at that choir and told everyone Dana should have it, that you didn't feel you deserved it. That was so generous, Ruth. So mature." I stood on my aunt's porch, holding an empty casserole dish, and I could not feel my own feet. I had not stood up at any choir. I had not said any such thing. My mother had not merely taken the solo. She had built a whole story in which I gave it away, gladly, out of humility. And she had told that story to the entire family and to the concert committee, and everyone believed it. Because why would a mother lie about her own daughter's kindness? That was the moment the shape of the thing changed for me. It was not a favor for a cousin who was going through a hard time. It was a story my mother preferred to the truth, a story where I was small and self-doubting and generous to a fault. Because that was the daughter she had always found easiest to have. The real me, the one who had walked up to a corkboard and seen her own name and cried, that daughter was inconvenient. She took up too much room, so my mother had quietly written her out and put a softer, more useful version in her place. And the terrible thing, the thing I sat with in my car outside my aunt's house for 20 full minutes with the engine off, was that a part of me almost believed the softer version too. Maybe I hadn't really earned it. Maybe Dana did need it more. My mother's story was so warm, and mine was so cold and lonely. And it is a frightening thing to realize how badly you want to be forgiven for a crime you did not commit. I drove home the long way that night, past the grocery store parking lot where I used to practice, and I sat there for a while, with the windows up, the way I used to. But I could not sing. I opened my mouth for the opening phrase, and nothing came. Just a thin ghost of air. And I understood that this was the real theft, not the 90 seconds on a stage. My mother had reached into the one place I thought she could never reach, the chest where the voice lived, and she had turned it against me. So that now, even alone in my own car, I could hear her saying, "You didn't feel you deserved it," and part of me nodding along. I sat there until my hands were cold on the wheel. Then I drove home and did not sing. And I did not sing the next night either. And the silence in my apartment got so loud that I finally started sleeping with the radio on, just to have another human voice in the dark that was not my mother's. The days after that were the loneliest of the whole ordeal. I went to work, I came home. I did not sing, not even in the car, because the car was where the solo lived, and I could not bear to visit it. I thought about quitting the choir entirely, disappearing before the concert so I would not have to stand 2 feet from my stolen part and smile. I drafted a message to Mr. Okafor 3 separate times, saying I was sick, that I could not perform, and 3 times I deleted it before sending. Something in me would not let me run, though I could not have told you what. Maybe it was just stubbornness, the last stubborn root of the girl who used to hum while she waited on Sundays. I kept going to rehearsal. I kept humming Dana's pitch to her under my breath. I kept my folder that said chorus on it in blue pen, and I kept it, God help me, because throwing it away felt like agreeing with it. In the middle of those gray weeks, something small happened that I planned and did not engineer, and I want to be honest about that because I did not scheme my way to justice. I was not clever. I did not steal a tape or set a trap or plot a reveal. What happened is that I was looking for a winter scarf in my closet, and I found, in a shoebox behind my old boots, a birthday card from a voice teacher I had studied with briefly in my 20s, a woman named Mrs. Halloran, who had since passed away. The card was 5 years old. It said, in her shaky hand, "Ruth, you have the rarest thing, a voice that tells the truth. Never let anyone talk you out of it." I sat on my closet floor with a scarf in my lap and read that card maybe 40 times. A voice that tells the truth. Never let anyone talk you out of it. And I realized that being talked out of it was precisely what was happening to me and had been happening my whole life, and that I had been helping. So slowly, something in me stopped folding on its old hinge. I decided I would sing the concert. I would stand in my second row spot and sing my chorus part as beautifully as I possibly could for Mrs. Halloran, for my grandmother with the stiff knuckles, for the girl in the parking lot who fogged the windows in winter, for nobody but the music. I would not fight my mother in public. I would not make a scene, because a scene was exactly the small, hysterical shape she would have loved to catch me in. I would just refuse, finally, to disappear. That was the whole of my plan. It was not revenge. It was survival. I started singing again in the car the next morning, badly at first, my voice rusty and unsure, and then better. And by the end of the week, the note came out round again, and I wept a little at a red light, not from sadness, but from getting something back that I had almost let them convince me was never mine. Concert night was the second Saturday in May, and the hall was full, which almost never happened. Word had gone around town, the way it does in small places. Folding chairs had been added at the back, and the church had propped the heavy doors open because the evening was warm and the crowd made the room close. My mother sat in the third row in her pearls with my aunt beside. Her and Dana's little cheering section, 3 of her friends from the city filling out the row. I was in the wings when Dana came to find me, and for one moment she was not careless at all. She was terrified. A 26-year-old who had never earned anything, staring down 90 seconds of unaccompanied silence in front of 200 people. Her hands were actually trembling. I don't think I can do the opening, she whispered. There's no music, Ruth. There's nothing to come in on. How do you just start? And I looked at her real fear. The first real thing I had ever seen her feel, and I felt the old reflex rise up in me, the one that wanted to fix it, to hum her pitch, to save the song, to be, one more time, the quiet reason nothing fell apart. It would have been so easy. My whole body knew how to do it. And for the first time in my entire life, standing in those dusty wings, I did not obey it. You just begin, I said quietly, and I meant it kindly. I did. Out of the silence. There's no cue. You make your own courage. Or you don't. That's the whole art of it. And I walked to my place in the second row and left her standing there alone with the thing she had not earned. And I did not feel cruel, and I did not feel triumphant. I felt, for once, simply honest. I had finally stopped saving people from the size of what they took. The concert opened. The hall lights dimmed to a single warm spot on the front riser, and the whole room went into that deep, waiting hush. The exact hush I had sung into on a snowy Tuesday in February. I could hear the radiator ticking. I could hear someone's program rustle and go still. Mr. Okafor raised his hands, and Dana opened her mouth. And nothing came out on time. She waited for a downbeat. His hands hung in the air, because there is no downbeat. There was never. A downbeat, the singer must make her own beginning, out of nothing. 2 seconds of dead silence became 4, became 6, and I watched Dana's sweet face crumble in the spotlight. And then she came in. Badly. Half a step under the pitch, and the note wavered and cracked, and she reached for the phrase and could not find it. And the beautiful, aching opening of The Long Way Home fell apart in front of the whole town. Somebody in the audience coughed. My mother's face, which I could see perfectly from the second row, went from pride to horror in the space of one breath. Dana tried again. That was almost the worst part, watching her try. She swallowed and reached for the note a second time, and it came out thinner, more frightened. And she looked at Mr. Okafor with wide, pleading eyes, begging him for the cue that did not exist. And I saw the exact moment she understood that no one was coming to save her. Because the person who always saved her was standing in the second row and had finally, quietly, stopped. The silence in that hall turned into a different kind of silence. The terrible kind. The kind an audience makes when it is embarrassed for someone. 200 people held their breath around one small woman who had been handed a thing she could not carry, and I did not enjoy it. I want you to know that. I had wanted this to be taken from me, and now that it was falling apart, I got no pleasure from the fall. Mr. Okafor lowered his hands. He stopped the piece. This was a thing he had never done in 5 years, never once, and the choir froze around me. He turned, slowly, and looked out at the audience, and then he did something I will remember for the rest of my life. He walked, without hurrying, to the small table beside the piano where his things were, and he picked up the ancient silver cassette recorder. The ugly one he refused to replace, and he carried it to the microphone at the front of the stage. His voice, when it came, was as flat and careful as it always was. No anger in it, no drama. Just the plainness of a man who had decided something. Before we continue, he said, I would like the hall to hear something. For fairness, I keep every audition, every year. This is the recording for the opening solo of this piece, made in February. And he held the little recorder up to the microphone, and he pressed the red button. And the hall filled with my voice. My February voice, round and steady and unafraid, rising out of that recorded silence. Exactly the way it had lived in my head my whole life. The opening of The Long Way Home, sung true and whole and clear. It poured out over 200 people and up into the church rafters, filling every corner of that stone room. And it was unmistakably a voice that had earned its place, a voice that had walked the long road back and sung into the dark anyway. Then, on the tape, when the last phrase ended, you could hear Mr. Okafor's recorded voice say, quietly, again, the last phrase. And my February voice sang it again, even better, even braver. And then the tape clicked off, and the real hall was so silent you could hear the recorder's little motor spin down. And Mr. Okafor set it on the piano and said into the microphone, "That is Ruth. That has always been Ruth. There has been an error, and I am correcting it now, in front of everyone. Because the music deserves the truth, even when people do not offer it." He looked directly at me in the second row. "Ruth," he said, "would you come and sing your solo?" I do not remember walking to the front. I remember the wood of the riser under my good shoes, and the single warm light finding my face. And the whole silent hall, waiting the way it had waited on a snowy Tuesday, when only 11 of us showed up. I remember that I could see my mother, and that her mouth was slightly open, and her hand was pressed flat to her pearls. And that, for once in my entire life, she had absolutely nothing to say. No story ready, no arrangement made. No version of me softer than the one that was about to open its mouth. And I remember that I was not angry standing up there. The anger had drained out of me somewhere between the wings and the light. What I felt was clean and quiet and enormous, like the moment before snow. I closed my eyes. I took a slow breath in my own chest, the trick I had taught to the girl who had stolen my place. The trick my grandmother taught me on a piano bench that smelled of orange. Peel. And I began, out of the silence, with no cue and no net, the way you are supposed to. And my voice came out exactly the way it lived in my head. Round, steady, unafraid. I sang the whole of it, every word about the long road back to a place that may not want you. Sung into the dark, because the singing is the only way home you have. And when the choir came in behind me, like a sunrise, 40 voices lifting, under mine, I felt something I had waited 31 years to feel, which was the feeling of being exactly where I had earned the right to be. In front of the one person who had spent my whole life telling me to wait. When the last chord faded, there was that beat of silence a hall gives. You, when it has actually been moved, one held breath. And then the applause came, and it did not stop when it should have stopped. It kept going. It was not for the family arrangement, and it was not for the story my mother had written in a pharmacy aisle. It was for the tape, and for the truth, and for the girl in the parking lot who had finally stopped humming to herself behind fogged glass and started, at last, to sing where people could hear her. I stood in the light and let it wash over me, and I did not look for my mother's face. Because for the first time in my life, I did not need to know what it was doing. My grandmother had closed her eyes for me on a Sunday 24 years before. That had always been enough. I had just forgotten for a while, that I already had everything I needed. Dana found me afterward, in the church kitchen, by the coffee urn. She was crying, and to her credit, it was not the pretty kind. It was the blotchy, honest kind. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I didn't know. She told me you gave it to me. She said you wanted me to have it, that it was your idea. And the strange thing is, I believed her." Dana had been handed my solo the same way she had been handed everything in her whole soft life, without being told where it came from or whose hands it had been taken out of. She was not the thief. She was just the gift my mother had wrapped in a lie. "I know," I told her, and I handed her a paper towel for her face. "It wasn't yours to give or to take. It was hers to lie about, and she used you to do it. You should be angry at her, too." She looked at me like that had genuinely never occurred to her, and maybe it hadn't. I was not warm to her, but I was not cruel. There is a difference, and it took me 31 years to learn how to live in it. My mother did not find me that night. She left before the reception, quietly, with her pearls and her aunt and her folding chair dignity, and I did not chase her down the aisle. Because chasing was the old shape, and I was done with the old shape. She called me 2 days later, and her voice was not bright. It was careful for once, almost small. "I suppose you're happy," she said. "You've embarrassed the whole family. Everyone was talking about it. And I want you to hear what I said, because I had waited 31 years to be able to say it without my voice folding on its hinge. I said, 'No, Mom. I sang a song I earned in front of people who wanted to hear it. You embarrassed the family when you decided the truth was less useful to you than a story where I'm small and grateful and easy to have. I'm done being that story. I've been that story my whole life, and I'm finished with it.'" There was a long silence on the line, the longest I can ever remember her giving me. She did not apologize. My mother is not a woman who has ever learned how, and I have stopped waiting for her to learn. Because waiting for it was just one more way of letting her tell me to wait. But she also, for the first time in my living memory, did not push. She did not talk over me, did not list Dana's needs, did not tell me not to make it about myself. She just said, "Well," in a voice with nothing behind it, and after a moment, she hung up. And I stood in my kitchen, and there was no cut apple going brown on the board, and my hands were not shaking, and I felt, at last, 31 years old, standing on my own 2 feet in my own quiet apartment. A grown woman who had finally been allowed to be the size she actually was. The choir kept the tape rule after that, of course, but Mr. Okafor added something to it. At the next season's first rehearsal, he stood up in his gray cardigan and said that from now on, the audition results would be read aloud, in front of everyone the very day they were decided, so that no name could ever again be quietly changed in a pharmacy aisle or a committee room or a phone call. He did not look at me when he said it, because he never was a man for meaningful looks or speeches. But I knew, and Priya knew, and she reached over and squeezed my hand in the alto section without a word. I sang that whole rehearsal with my chest wide open, and it was the best I have ever sounded. Because there was nothing left inside me that I was trying to keep small. No part of me still humming quietly to itself, hoping to be allowed. So here is what I want to leave you with tonight, wherever in the world you are listening from. People will tell stories about you. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you most will write you into a smaller shape. Because the smaller shape is easier for them to hold and easier for them to explain. And you will be tempted, and I mean truly tempted, to believe them because their story is warm and yours is lonely. And it is a terrible and disorienting thing to defend a truth that no one else in the room will defend alongside you. But somewhere, in a shoebox or a silver recorder, or the memory of one teacher who once saw you clearly, the truth is written down in your own true voice. It does not need to scream. It does not need to ruin anyone or burn anything down. It only needs one day in the right silence to be played. So keep singing the true thing, quietly, even in a parking lot with the windows up, even when the only one listening is you. Keep it round and steady and unafraid. And do not let anyone convince you that you did not earn the note just because it made them uncomfortable to hear how high you could go. The tape is fair, even when people are not. And your real voice, the one that tells the truth about who you are, is the rarest and the most stubborn thing you will ever own. It waited for me for 31 years, patient in the dark. It will wait for you, too. Never, ever let anyone talk you out of it.